in 1 minute or less, which is probably impossible, what can you tell us your overview of Harlow and Gilston Garden Town?
Harlow and Gilston Garden Town describes the partnership between the 5 local authorities that cover the spatial area, in terms of their ambition to deliver good growth. So they have an ambition to deliver 24,000 new homes with associated infrastructure and services. And part of the need of that comes from where we are in terms of housing crisis and demand, and we can talk about that as a preface. And if we're going to have that level of growth, those partners want it to be good, strong, inclusive growth for the people that are here now and the people to come. It's a really unique proposition because unlike any other garden town in the country, actually, it's about new homes that will happen around Harlow, but also the existing town of Harlow. So within Harlow itself, and the regeneration of Harlow Town Centre. So it's a really unique, exciting proposition. I think it was a minute.
That's all right. Will it happen?
Yes, I believe it will happen. I can't prejudge the outcome of planning committees. Not my place to do that. But the growth is planned. The growth is in the local plan. So in the planning process, it's been accepted that the growth will happen. The sites have been allocated. Epping local plan is still going through, obviously, but that's what we think will happen there. And we already have the first of those major applications in, which is with the Gilston developments to the north of Harlow, which will be 10,000 homes. And notwithstanding that, within Harlow itself, homes have been continued to be delivered and growth has continued to happen for the last 5 years. That's also part of the Garden Town.
You've done a lot of outreach work. I think the last time I saw you was at the Civic Society. What's been the good feedback and what have been the polite criticisms of what you're doing?
Okay, that's a really good question. So I think in terms of the good feedback, I think there's a lot of support for the ambition. There's support for, I would say, the goodwill and the aspiration from the public sector to want to achieve growth to Garden Town principles. And Garden Town principles are really a shorthand way of saying we want this to be beautiful, we want it to be sustainable, we want it to be well connected to nature, we want people to be able to have jobs where they live. I mean, that's really what Garden Town principle is about. I call it good growth, actually, more than I call it Garden Town. But the aspiration to want to deliver that and the aspiration to want to be able to maximise the investment that's needed for Harlow is absolutely 100% there. And people, I think, on the whole, people understand that. On the whole, a lot of the people I've spoken to have said that that's something that they welcome, albeit this isn't easy stuff, and it's not easy stuff for anybody. Change is difficult, change is challenging. And the less, you asked me about the less, didn't you?
Yeah. What have been the, you may want to go away and think about this.
No, so I mean, in terms of, well, I think I've just said it, change is difficult and change is challenging. And when you live in a place that's changing, it can be fearful about what it means. Does it mean more traffic? Does it mean my place won't look the same in the way that I've always known it? Will it be worse? Because you don't know, and anything you don't know is uncomfortable. And people worry about that, and I 100% get that. And there's a lot of concern from existing people about the feeling that there'll be loads more people, loads more houses, and they'll use our services and they'll put pressure on our systems, and that will make it more difficult for me and for us who are already here. How will you mitigate that? How will that not happen? That's sort of I think probably in a nutshell, the things that are more challenging.
Every week I put in, planning application stories, whether it's a conservatory to rather larger ones, river crossings, but we'll not touch on that. But whatever you put on with housing, people ask questions because they are the grandchildren or the children of people who came here and got a house. And they just look across to what you're doing saying, is there any council housing there? So I ask you, is there any council housing there, or social housing they call it? And if not, why not?
Yeah. So the different local authorities have got different levels in terms of the amount they want to get, but they've all got an amount. It's 30% in Harlow. And the idea of affordable housing is that there's different types of affordable housing. So social rent is one. It's what people will usually, when they talk about council housing, they're talking about what we now call social housing. Affordable housing, the difference between those two is actually the level of rent. So social housing will be 60% of market rent. Affordable housing will be 80% of market rent. And then you have types of affordable home ownership. So whether that's equity share, you're buying a proportion of your house that you can scale up, or you're getting help with a deposit. Those are different affordable housing options as well. So there's a menu for people depending what they want to achieve in life or what they can afford as well. So yes, absolutely. Each of the local planning authorities, each of the places wants to deliver and will deliver affordable housing.
Somebody asked a question the other day, this is not for you, I guess, or why I'm asking that question is, young people, and I've got to be conscious that I'm asking questions to somebody who's 60 in 2 weeks. I'm always got to be careful. I'm not, so I'm asking on behalf of my 4 grandchildren. Surely not. And what's in it for them? 4 grandchildren, between the age of 2 and 13. Yeah. What's in it for them in Harlow?
Yeah, okay. I think that's the right question, by the way, from my perspective, because in terms of my own personal motivation and my motivation about working here and doing this is wanting to be able to deliver something for future generations that meets the needs of what we need now and the needs of the future. So if you start with the very big picture, very, very big picture, we've got a housing crisis. It's been a crisis as long as I've worked in housing, which is about 30 years. It's not, it's not a surprise, but we need to build 300,000 homes a year in this country. It's 300,000 homes a year. We've had exceptional performance in the last few years, and that's still only got us to about 240,000 homes. The backlog is immense. And we all know what that means. It means that we can't afford to buy houses, because when there's something in short supply, the price of it goes up. That's part of the reason why affordability is a big issue for people, and why you might have been able to buy a home in Harlow 60 years ago on 2 times salary, but now it will be 6, probably 6 or 7. I don't know that actually, but it's probably about 6 or 7. Where I live, it's about 18. It's ridiculous. How can my children live near me? They can't afford to live near me. And so what's in it at a very big picture is a real desire to want to make that different, to want to be able to get good homes, good quality homes for the future generation. So there's definitely that. Then if you ever look at some of the other big picture things that are going on in Harlow, there are some really difficult statistics around Harlow that relate to health of people and economic health and levels of education and professional attainment. And they're really difficult to read and painful to look at, because it's a place that, in the parlance of today's world, is a place that needs levelling up. And I think that the kind of growth that we're talking about can be done in a way that helps with that levelling up agenda, that will bring investment and prosperity, and it will start to make growth more inclusive. And what I mean about that is, you see this with gentrification, don't you, of places where you get a part of a town or a place, and people start to move in, and it gets very smart, and it starts to look very different to its neighbours, but the neighbours don't benefit. Well, we want that externality. We want that benefit to flow. I don't even want it to flow evenly. I want it to flow unevenly to the people who need it the most. That's what I want the growth to do. I want it to benefit disproportionately to the people who haven't been getting it. And that's one of the things I think this growth can do. And that's big macro stuff. That's how do we make sure that the private house building sector contributes in the fullest way possible in terms of developer contributions that it makes in exchange for the housing. You know, it's all about that really big deal that we're trying to pull off.
And how much power do you have? How much leverage? You know, talking to developers. Is that a diplomatic conversation you have, or is it more do you have to be quite firm?
It's a robust commercial discussion, and it's a very robust commercial discussion, and one that these local authorities have been preparing for a long time. So before I arrived, they've put in place, they just sound like really boring documents: the IDP, the Infrastructure Development Plan, the Vision Statement, the Design Guide, the Sustainability Checklist, the RIF MOU, which you reported on last week. You know, you read them and you think, you know, what is that? That's the bedrock. That means that when we go in and talk to developers, you have the power and the levers to be able to say, this isn't a surprise. This is what it costs to develop here. This is how you mitigate the impact of your development for the people here and the people to come. And those are robust commercial discussions.
All the councils are on board, but are some more on board than others? And I just wondered if the new Conservative regime, do you interpret, I know you're not political, but do you think they're playing hardball with you when it comes to places like Water Lane and Latin Priory? Are they part of the problem or part of the solution?
The new administration at Harlow is behind the Garden Town. I've had that assurance from them. They've also written that publicly. They're behind the Garden Town. They see the Garden Town as part of their future and their 2047 future as well, in terms of how growth will happen. I think our aspirations must be one of the same, because the Garden Town and Harlow are also one and the same thing. And that's about wanting to level up growth within the town, regenerate the town centre, and again, making sure that that growth is inclusive. It goes to everyone, and to some people than others.
So do we, just go out for a second, do we have to sort of, like a drone, look at what you've got more in context with the sort of London Stansted Cambridge corridor, you know, and look at saying, this is where this is, but it isn't just connected to Harlow, it's connected to a much bigger area?
Yeah, I mean, the discussion about places and what a place is and what a community is people have so many, and rightly so many opinions about what is my place, how am I connected to other places. You and I could talk for hours about it, and people have done generations before us. You know, Ebenezer Howard, who was the architect really of the Garden Town movement, he was all about how do places connect to other places in a way that is sustainable. That's the bedrock of how growth happens. In terms of helicoptering out, I think what I would say about that is there are opportunities, and going back to your 4 grandchildren, this place gives them opportunities. The corridor from between London to Cambridge and Stansted is made up of lots of different things, and it's made up of pressures in different places. So if you take it, if you think about the biomedical industry in Cambridge, that there is nowhere really for new business to grow and develop in Cambridge, but it still wants the cachet of being close to it. It still wants access to the intellectual property of it. Well, we're only 40 minutes down the road, right? So why wouldn't we want to capitalise on that? If that helps our place, if that gives opportunity to people, that helps Harlow to continue its transition from the place it was 60 years ago, through the iterations that it's had since, to the place it will be in 2047. I don't see it as being. I don't think there will ever be a huge. You drone up, you look down on your drone, and it's built over from London to Cambridge. That's not going to happen. But then there is the ability for us to be able to consolidate that on and to take the opportunities that it can give us. The Golden Triangle, which is London, Cambridge, Oxford, which sounds like a massive geography, when you put that onto a global stage, that area, it's one of the 3rd top biomedical places in the world, in the whole world. So why can't we have a slice of that? Because that would be good for us.
Are you all, I mentioned councils, but also your partner agencies, say growth boards and also your own board. Are you all singing from the same hymn sheet there? You've got the hospital, you've got people like the new incarnation of Public Health England, other organisations, MPs. Are you all singing from the same hymn sheet? Are you all aiming for the same things, or are you aiming for different things? And are you all at different stages and different speeds?
Well, I think all of that probably. Are we aiming for different things? We have different organisational objectives, but in terms of where I believe all the partners are coming from, is they want to move to the next iteration of what they will be. That's what I believe they want to do. And we are all in the same place in that sense. The Harlow Growth Board wants the same thing as the Garden Town and vice versa. We want the best for Harlow. Harlow it's the engine of the Garden Town. It's really important that its ability to function and to be an economic driver and to be a nice place to be a nice place, a destination place that people want to come to. Why wouldn't we want that? We definitely do. Yeah.
I looked at your website, and I looked at your website, and I just thought it said something about the town centre. Yeah. And I thought, you're not in charge of Harlow, though, are you? You're just a partner. It looks as if you were going to change the town centre, and I thought that was the people we democratically elected, not you.
Yeah, no, that's right. So we work in partnership with Harlow Council. So Harlow is at the centre of the Garden Town. So when we're talking about the Garden Town vision and aspirations, it covers Harlow. That was one of the first conversations I had with Harlow. What does the Garden Town mean to you? And the answer is, we are the Garden Town. We are aligned in terms of what we're doing. But in terms of how we operate as the Garden Town, there are things that the different partners do that they lead on and is right for them to do. Think of it as cogs in a machine. That's the way I think of it. Harlow Town Centre and its regeneration, we cog into each other because we're important to each other in different ways. But I don't need to drive that cog. They do that. And we make sure that we are in the same place and we maximise our resources, we maximise our thinking in order to get the best thing for each other, to make it work for each other, because we're mutually dependent.
If you had the power, would you change the name of Harlow?
I've never even thought about it. Harlow is an ancient name. It goes back hundreds and hundreds of years. No, I wouldn't change it. I wouldn't change the name of Harlow.
Okay. So where do you think, just a couple more questions. So where is there a timeline? We're talking about, just give people how that will affect people at Harlow. Is some, I know you mentioned planning application, that's difficult, but is there in your mind, the ribbon cutting of the family moving in, etc., those key images, those key dates? Is there anything in your wish list that you could see?
Yeah, I think in terms of what I think people will start to see, the next 3 years are going to be a period of change. Initially, it will start to be change that we see in things coming forward for approval. We've got that happening next week. Not judging the outcome of that. We've got the planning permission to come forward, the planning determination to come forward for Gilston in the new year, in the first half of next year. I anticipate that we'll start to see Latin Priory start to come forward as well. And then it won't be long after those things that happen in the system, in the bureaucracy, that we will start to see development and spades in the ground, diggers. But before then, I would also like to, there are other things that we need to work on that are really important. So the transport strategy, which is starting to be approved by the councils. I mean, the transport strategy is predicated on really significant modal shift, as we call it. But this is about, how do we in the future, how do we travel around? We can't possibly know, can we, sitting here? There might be some mode of transport that's invented in 10 years' time we can't even imagine. But how do we travel around in a world that's increasingly thinking about what does carbon mean? What do emissions mean? What do they mean for my health and my children's health? Am I doing this in the most sensible way possible? And we need to try and vision that all the time so that the infrastructure that we build is fit for purpose for the world that we're moving into. And that is about all sorts of things: climate change, healthy living, enabling people to to move around in different ways that's good for all of us.
And finally, do you enjoy what you do?
Do I enjoy? Yes, I do enjoy what I do. It's very challenging. I think there's probably no other role quite like it, because I'm working with 5 councils all the time, and they are very open to thinking how they can best achieve that. They're very impressive as a partnership. I can't rate the officers highly enough in terms of how they are trying to ambitiously move this forward in a world that's very constrained in terms of public sector finances and resources. When we spend money in the public sector, we have to be absolutely certain and confident that we put that pound to where it can be best effective for people, because it's their pound, right? It's our taxes. I want my public servants to spend that well for me, and I want to spend it well for them as well.